Hi, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up, the Montefiore AIDS Center was awarded $6.8 million to curb the disproportionate impact of HIV on the Black, Hispanic, and LGBTQ communities. The medical director for the Montefiore AIDS Center shares more on their fight to help the people of the Bronx within these communities. Then, the 529 Savings Plan has been a valuable financial tool to help families save money for college and use tax-free money to pay for college expenses. The Senior Industry Analyst for Bankrate speaks with us later on about some recent changes to this plan. After that, the New York Restoration Project believes nature is a fundamental human right. We speak with the Senior Engagement Manager for the NYRP to learn about the amazing work they do to help bring green spaces to the 5 boroughs. And finally, the Better Business Bureau joins us in studio to talk about some common scams that can pop up around this time. The executive director of BBB, serving Metropolitan New York, shares some tips on how to stay safe from these scams. So stay tuned to all this and much more is headed your way because we're now officially open. Hello everyone, I'm Kibin Alleyne and today is Tuesday, January 23rd. You are now watching Open, a program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. In recognition of World AIDS Day, the Montefiore AIDS Center received $6.8 million to mitigate the disproportionate impact of HIV on Black, Hispanic, and LGBTQ communities. The medical director for the Montefiore AIDS Center, Dr. Barry Zingman, joins me to discuss how this funding will amplify prevention and treatment programs in the Bronx. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, can you provide an overview of the Montefiore AIDS Center and its role as one of the largest HIV prevention and treatment programs in New York State?
Absolutely. The Montefiore AIDS Center has become a comprehensive program for people at risk for or living with HIV. We've designed our services to really be supportive of people in their sexual health lives, people who are trans non-binary or LGBTQ positive, or people who are living with HIV. And we provide a full set of holistic services to support people and to live long and healthy lives.
Now, as I mentioned recently, the Montefiore AIDS Center received $6.8 million by the New York State and the NYC Department of Health. Basically, can you just explain in what ways is the funding crucial to address the impact of HIV?
Sure. We are so appreciative of the New York State Department of Health and New York City Department of Health to support the comprehensive care. And what these grants go for is it's 3 different grants. One is from New York City Department of Health, is aimed at people not living with HIV, people who are sexually active, people who are LGBTQ plus, and it helps them to be tested for STIs, sexually transmitted infections, to be treated, to be supported in going on to treatments to prevent HIV, so-called PrEP, PEP, and also really critically important for people who are at risk for STIs and HIV is to support them for other factors that may increase their risk. So, for example, if they're having mental health problems, if they're having substance use problems, if they're having insecure housing, food insecurity, all of these things contribute to risk. And so this grant helps us to address those with staffing that can help them to assess where they're at and help them get to a better spot.
Yeah.
And then there's two other grants. The two other grants are aimed at people living with HIV, also to provide them with comprehensive supportive services. One is aimed at young people, young LGBTQ individuals, ages 16 to 30, and that's at our Oval Center site. And the other is aimed at older individuals living with HIV at our Center for Positive Living site. All these grants provide us, allow us to have staff who can help patients with overcoming barriers to getting into care, help with insurance coverage, help with adherence to medications and treatments, help with education, which is critically important, and we help them to support them with what I was mentioning before, what are so-called social determinants of health. So things like housing and food and employment and education, that all of which, if there are difficulties in those areas, they can lead to increased risk.
Right. Now, I also want to highlight the fact that, as mentioned, it's focusing on LGBTQ plus communities and BIPOC communities. What are some of the unique challenges and health disparities faced by these individuals in the Bronx that prompted Montefiore AIDS Center to tailor its services to meet their specific needs?
Okay. I'll say first that we've been able to, with these grants and with our amazing staff, we've been able to be very successful at meeting the needs of those populations. So these groups, as is really well known, often aren't well tied to the medical system. They may not have a primary care doctor. They may be distrustful of the medical system that has historically often treated them not so well, not treated them with equity, provided them with the expert care that they need and deserve, and the dignity that they need and deserve, and in most medical settings, those social determinants are something that the patient has to deal with on their own. But for BIPOC and LGBTQ communities, they often need help with these. To overcome these, there may be language barriers, there may be distrust barriers, and so they need help with overcoming these to get to that better spot.
Now, how does Montefiore envision more equitable HIV prevention and treatment outcomes in the Bronx?
So basically the way I described it. So if you can provide a safe and affirming place where people know that they're not going to be judged, that they're going to be treated according to who they are and where they're at, and that they're going to be provided with things that they didn't even know that a healthcare institution could provide to them, like phone calls a week after coming in, like how you doing on your medicine, like help with insurance, like help with actually getting your medications, help with housing, other things, so, help with education to understand that if you're coming to us for the possibility of a sexually transmitted infection, that you actually may not even have thought of the fact that you're at risk for HIV and really should be talked to about HIV prevention as well. And you may come to us because you're LGBTQ plus and not know where you can get gender affirming care. And we offer that as well on site. So people come to us and don't really realize the range of services they can get that and how welcoming it is.
Now, something you mentioned was the social determinants of health, and that is a term that I've been hearing a lot more lately, especially as I have these types of conversations with more health professionals. Can you expand on that a little bit more for those who may not understand? Because I think that, especially when we're talking about this type of healthcare, people often think that it's solely your behavior or your actions that determine your health. So can you just expand a little bit more on the social determinants of health?
Sure. So there are certain categories of needs that are said to be social determinants of health. Some of these categories, and these categories are things that affect people's lives in such a strong way that they can no longer access health care well. And so, for example, lack of employment or underemployment. If you're not employed, you may not have an income, you may not be able to afford childcare, you may not be able to afford to take a day off to come to clinic, you may not have benefits, you may not have insurance, you may not be able to afford the transportation to the clinic. So same with education, with housing. If your housing is insecure, then medical care is not the first thing on your mind. Each of these things snowballs. So the person themselves is not accessing care. If they've been exposed to a sexually transmitted infection, then they're not accessing care, they're not getting treated for it, they may be passing it on to others. All of this snowballs, and if you're living with HIV, then you may not access the care you need, and then your HIV may just get worse and worse, and you may transmit it to others. And so these are absolutely critical supports that we've learned over decades are really the critical things for many people to be able to span the gap from what do we know works, what do we know is efficacious to treat something, but why are so many people not getting these treatments? Why are so many people not, and it's social determinants of health that is really that gap.
Thank you so much for kind of explaining that and clarifying that. Now, looking ahead, what milestones are anticipated by the Montefiore AIDS Center with the new funding?
Okay, thanks. So we've been very pleased that we are we're seeing new patients every day, every month. One of the milestones we're looking for is whether or not people are being treated, whether or not they're coming back, whether or not they're taking medications, whether or not they're bringing in friends and family, whether or not they are satisfied with their care, whether or not they're accessing gender-affirming care if they're trans or non-binary, whether or not they are achieving some of those endpoints with social determinants, and hopefully whether or not they're staying HIV negative because they're being treated for STIs and they're accessing HIV prevention treatments. If you're HIV positive, then the number one goal medically is to have a so-called undetectable viral load. So where the virus HIV, when we test the blood for it, it is down to 0. It is not active. So that's a major goal. And if people living with HIV have an undetectable HIV viral load, they may live a normal lifespan.
Now, how often should someone get screened for HIV? And on top of that, where should they go?
Okay. Well, they should come to us. No, but there's many places. So that's the most important thing, is actually just going to get screened. How often to be screened for HIV depends on a person's individual risk factors. So somebody who's not sexually active at all should just get a single baseline HIV test, and that may be fine if they're not sexually active at all. But somebody who's frequently sexually active, particularly somebody who may have multiple partners, may or may not be using condoms, has had sexually transmitted infections in the last year or two, they should be getting tested for HIV potentially up to every 3 months. And so people who are taking HIV prevention treatments, we are testing them for HIV every 3 months. We're also testing them for STIs as well that frequently. And so it's a range depending upon a person's risk. If somebody hasn't been sexually active and then last week went to a party and then they should be tested for HIV and sexually transmitted infections if they have any symptoms, or at least about 4 to 6 weeks later.
Now, where can people go to learn more information?
So there's so many places. Luckily, there's so many places. So there's local health clinics. There's the Montefiore AIDS Center and its clinics, the Oval Center and the Center for Positive Living. The CDC has wonderful information on their internet site. New York City Department of Health, New York State Department of Health. There's wonderful information out there. But some of that isn't necessarily accessed in the language of choice, and so often you can get your best information from your local clinic if they have the staff who are there to meet these needs.
Well, Doctor, I want to thank you so much for joining us and educating our community.
Thank you so much.
If you would like to learn more about the Montefiore AIDS Center's work and their efforts, please go to their website at www.montefiore.org/HIV-AIDS. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this.
I remember when the Bronx did not really have a media outlet properly representing the people of the Bronx.
BronxNet provides for the community by being a community where people can be empowered to share their voices.
We are in a really great place technologically. We've got all the resources that we need to be effective.
Whether it's through cameras, storytelling, editing, we have provided those services for 30 years.
BronxNet's mission is to be a voice for the community.
To educate, to inform, and to inspire.
And you can be a part of it. We've built studios for you.
Welcome back. For many parents looking to send their kids to college, the 529 Savings Program offers a plan toward that goal. However, new changes to the program could provide families with more options for security in their futures. Senior Industry Analyst for Bankrate, Ted Rossman, joins me to discuss the program. Ted, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Now, for those who are unaware, can you please give us a little bit more details about the 529 Savings Program?
This is basically a tax-advantaged college savings program. So the way it works typically is that you're not going to pay federal or state taxes when you take out money that's a qualified distribution. So basically you put it in there, you do pay federal taxes on the front end, you get a state tax break, but then the real advantage is when it comes time to take the money out, you're not going to be taxed on those distributions. So the idea is this money grows over time. Later on, you take it out for college tuition or room and board or other qualified, often higher education expenses, and then you're not going to have to pay taxes on that money. So it's sort of a double win. There's the tax advantage, but there's also this discipline of saving and investing and encouraging people to put this money aside for the future.
Now, can you explain how it actually works? Because I'm very curious, is it parents or guardians putting maybe like $10 a month into an account? How does it actually work?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it could be amounts that small. It could be somewhat larger amounts as well. But yeah, it's kind of like your workplace retirement plan where the idea is to periodically put more money in. So you could actually set up an automatic transfer. That would actually be a great idea that, every paycheck you have some money put into this 529 plan for your kids or grandkids, and then it grows over time. Slow and steady can win the race when it comes to some of these longer term financial goals. And I often point out that with retirement, for example, every dollar you set aside in your 20s or 30s might be $30 or $40 by the time you retire decades later, just because money grows in the market. And for college savings, it's probably not going to grow quite that much because you have more of a constrained time frame. But hey, I mean, if you have a young child now, maybe they're not going to college for 15 or 16 or 17 years. I mean, you can get a lot of gains here. So there's the tax advantage, but there's also the fact that look at it this way. If you're getting a 10% return, which is pretty typical historically in the stock market, your money's doubling roughly every 7 years. So I know that college costs are going through the roof, but one way that we can fight back against this is by saving and investing early and often. It doesn't even have to be huge sums to make a difference.
Now, this seems very beneficial to, any of the recipients that are in the program. What do these funds actually go toward?
You can use this for tuition, room and board, books, computers, really a wide variety of education expenses. In New York, it's focused much more on college. Some states actually let you take distributions for K-12 education, like for private school, for example, tuition. In New York, that does not have a tax advantage. It was kind of left open to the states to decide whether or not to opt in and out. So for New Yorkers, I would say we should think about this as a college retirement or a college investment vehicle.
Now, when should a parent actually begin looking into the savings program, especially if this is something maybe that they're just hearing about for the first time?
It's kind of like that proverb about the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. I think early and often is the name of the game if you can. Now, I understand that money is tight and a lot of people, unfortunately, are having trouble meeting day-to-day expenses. And you think about college and it's like, whoa, that's just, not attainable. I would stress that every little bit can count. So, do what you can. There was a recent change that actually eliminated, I would say, one of the barriers to saving and investing, which is that some people worried that if their child doesn't go to college or maybe wins a scholarship, that this money is then wasted. Because if it's not used for qualified higher education expenses, then there's a penalty. So there's a 10% penalty, plus you're taxed on all the earnings. That has been a deterrent for people. That barrier has been removed to some extent. So actually starting this year, if you have unused 529 funds, they can actually gradually be transferred into a Roth IRA retirement plan. So there are limits. You can only convert up to $35,000 lifetime, and you can only convert up to $7,000 a year if you're under age 50. But still, I do think this has removed one of the potential barriers to saving and investing.
So you brought up something that I thought was very interesting, which was age, because people finish college at any age. Is that one of the restrictions or one of the limitations that if you're over a certain age and maybe you haven't used the money yet, are you no longer able to use it? Can you kind of maybe go into some of those details?
There are some things you can do there. So there's not an age limit on who can use these funds. So if you're somebody who maybe has been in the workforce in a while and then goes back to school and you have access to 529 money, you can use that. It's also very easy to change the beneficiary. So, if you have multiple children and maybe the oldest didn't go to college or maybe they got a scholarship or they didn't use all the money, you can change the beneficiary and use it for another child or potentially even grandchild. So, that part is very flexible. The key, though, is qualified education expenses. And in New York, higher education expenses. That's the main barrier. It's not necessarily the age or the person, but I think some people don't realize that you can transfer to other children or grandchildren or even yourself.
Now, you kind of talked about the changes that were coming to the plan. How does this change benefit families who actually have the 529 savings plan?
I think it has two main benefits. The first one is that it opens up more uses for this education money without the penalty. So the fact that you can convert that into retirement savings and investments, that's valuable because we know a lot of people are undersaved for retirement as it is. So it's kind of a double win there. So I think that is really important. And just at a time that all these costs are going up, I think that eliminating some of these barriers to entry is definitely important. Because some people say that they're not contributing just because they worry that, oh, what if I'm going to end up paying the penalty because my kid doesn't go to college or because they got a scholarship. The fact that now you can convert this into a retirement plan is useful. Again, though, it's not all at once and it's maybe not the full amount. I mean, you do need to be mindful of some of those limits, like that $7,000 a year limit for most people and the $35,000 lifetime cap. But I think it's still a step in the right direction.
So that was going to be my next question. With this change, would you still recommend maybe a parent or a guardian who is looking to, looking into the program? Is this still something that is worth taking a look at?
I think it is, definitely. Yeah, I think that the tax benefits are important, but I think also the discipline of routinely saving and investing, I think is really beneficial. So I do think 529 plans are useful. New York has a good plan that has that state tax deduction. So if you're a single contributor, you can deduct up to $5,000 a year in state income. If you're married filing jointly, it doubles to $10,000 a year. So there is that tax advantage on the front end. There's the tax advantage on the back end where these qualified distributions are not going to be taxed. But I also think just sort of this future look is really important, similar to retirement savings. I know it may feel far off, but I think it's sort of twofold. I think it's the tax advantage, but I think it's also just getting started because you don't really want to time the market. You want to have more time in there, and over a 10 or 20-year period, there's a very high likelihood that those contributions will rise in value substantially.
Now, I'm curious to know, how could this program help families who struggle with financial literacy, or, could it maybe bring up some challenges for families who struggle with financial literacy?
I think it's one of these things where a little bit now can turn into a lot later on. That idea that with a 10% annual return, your money is doubling every 7 years or so. I mean, if you start when your child is born or soon thereafter, you might have 2.5 of those doubling periods by the time they go to college, maybe even 3 by the time they finish college. So, in that sense, money is accumulating more money. And then you throw in the tax advantage, and that is a further benefit. So I do think it's a good idea to get started early if you can. I mean, even if it's only 25 or $50 a month or a paycheck. Maybe you can also look to bump it up over time. I think, like your retirement savings, sometimes there's an element of you don't miss what you don't see. So if you get a raise or every few months, maybe you can try to bump up that contribution.
Now, how can those who are interested create one? And, what are the steps to doing this, especially if you have multiple children?
nysaves.gov is the New York State 529 plan website, so it's easy to sign up there and get more information. We also have more information at Bankrate about 529 plans and the importance of saving for college. There's sort of multiple schools of thought with multiple children. One is if you do have just a single plan, you can change the beneficiary later on. So like if your oldest child doesn't use all the money, you can just easily change the beneficiary to another child, and then it's kind of as simple as that. There are, though, sometimes benefits to having separate accounts because it does keep things maybe a little more organized, so you know exactly what each child has. But also with this conversion we're talking about, where unused funds can be transferred to somebody else, the account for that purpose has to be open in that person's name for at least 15 years. So that's actually a good reason to have separate plans if you have separate children.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation. I definitely learned a lot. And I hope the parents and guardians out there have definitely learned a little bit from this segment. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
For more guidance about these changes to the 529 plan, please go to www.bankrate.com. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.
Hey everyone, it's your girl Kat from the Kitty Rose Lifestyle, also from The Next Chapter, where we discuss shades of gray every week right here at BronxNet, Saturdays at 11 p.m. Wow, 30 years. 30 years of BronxNet public access television. I'm a girl from Brooklyn and came to the Bronx 25 years ago, started my journey on BronxNet on public access television in 2016, and BronxNet is where I got my start. BronxNet, I feel like, is a home away from home. They support all of my endeavors, and I wouldn't have been able to be on any of the other channels if it wasn't for the fundamentals that I learned right here at my start here at BronxNet. So I am so appreciative. My son says I should stop telling people I'm from Brooklyn because I've been here now, Bronx Strong, for 22 years. So I'm so grateful, and I wish you much success in 30 years, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30 more, because public access is necessary so that people like myself can have a voice. Yes, BronxNet, it's your girl Kat from Kitty Rose. Check me out every Saturday at 11 p.m. right here, Channel 68, The Next Chapter, where we discuss shades of gray.
Mwah.
Welcome back. The New York Restoration Project believes access to nature is a basic human right. With this belief in mind, the Nature Conservancy dedicates time to restoring and providing high-quality green spaces in underserved communities across New York City. Senior Engagement Manager Jessica North joined me to discuss this effort. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I think this is really exciting to explain. So award-winning actress Bette Midler founded the NYRP back in 1995, which is pretty amazing. How did this organization come to be, and what could have possibly inspired the creation of the organization?
Yes, so Bette founded NYRP back in the 1990s because at the time what she saw was a state of severe neglect of our New York City parks and our open spaces. So maybe younger New Yorkers may not remember, but older New Yorkers probably do. Many of our parks were littered with heaps of trash. Tires were piled up in some of our parks, and even abandoned cars. So what Bette did was she organized a group of volunteers, friends, family, and she started cleaning up parks in northern Manhattan, an area that we still maintain today. And basically, Bette believed that everyone deserved access to clean green space, no matter what community they lived in.
Now, what is the overall vision of the organization?
So New York Restoration Project believes that access to nature is a fundamental right of every New Yorker. We believe that no matter what community you live in, you deserve high quality, clean, green space. And so since our founding, that's what we've been focused on doing.
Now, how do you see the vision working out successfully for each of the 5 boroughs? And I think it's so important to mention that it's in all the 5 boroughs because we know sometimes some boroughs may see a little bit more neglect than others. So how does this work successfully throughout New York City?
Okay, so today, over 1.6 million New Yorkers live within a 10-minute walk of an NYRP site. We own 52 community gardens across all 5 boroughs. You're correct, in all 5 boroughs, even in Staten Island. And we also manage 80 acres of parkland in northern Manhattan. So that's High Bridge Park and Sherman Creek Park in Inwood. And every year we build more than 20 community gardens across the city for partner organizations. And so doing that really is basically, we call it a success.
Now, I think it's so interesting that there is an emphasis on the gardens, because I think that a lot of times when we think green space, we just think maybe a park. But can you talk about, the Bronx gardens and just how, gardens are a big part of the organization as well?
Yeah, so we're a land trust, so that means that we hold these gardens in perpetuity as public open spaces. We have 52 of them, 13 here in the Bronx. And the community gardens, while we perform maintenance weekly, our ops team does, we rely on community volunteers to open these spaces. So I always say community gardens don't exist without community. So so basically the community gardeners volunteer their time to open the gardens for the community to enjoy.
Now, you talked about community and volunteers. How does your organization use resources like that to transform vacant or abandoned lots and buildings, which you mentioned earlier that a lot of older New Yorkers may have noticed that, but I think even today, in some areas of the Bronx, we see a lot of vacant lots. So, what does your organization do to kind of transform that?
So what we do through our Gardens for the City program, partner organizations that maybe have underutilized open space can apply to us to revitalize that space, create a community garden for them. So for instance, just this past year in the fall, we renovated Bissell Garden here in the Wakefield section of the Bronx. And that took our team like 3 weeks to renovate the space, build more than 50 community garden beds there, plant tons of plants, I think over 100 in that space. So, and we also partner with schools. So if they want to build a community garden, we can build that for them in their space. Just a couple years ago, we partnered with PS 811X to build them a community garden. And then the benefit of that is followed the build. Actually, we have an urban ag team that comes in and does education. So at PS 811X, our urban ag team brought their expertise to work with teachers who then turn that knowledge over to their students, how to garden in the space.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't even realize that education was also like a part of transforming, our space around it. Can you expand on that a little?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can build a garden, but if you don't have that program to follow up, if you don't know how to plant something, the garden's going to sit unused. So, yes. So it actually came out of the pandemic. We really recognized that it was really important food access, food security. I mean, we saw what so many people were food insecure during the pandemic, still continue to be. So we adopted an urban ag department. And our urban ag team goes around the city, works with our Gardens for the City partners to bring their expertise to teach people how to grow food and vegetables and maximize their yields.
Now, even just talking about this, it kind of brings a smile to my face because I think there's no way you can hear a garden and not feel automatically just like better. How have you seen, this kind of transform the quality of life and just kind of like the morale in these neighborhoods?
Oh, I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of gardeners who tell me that they garden because they find it therapeutic. To get their hands in the soil, to be sitting in their garden and just hear birds. I always think back to, we have a garden, Target Bronx Community Garden here in Highbridge, and one day they sent me a picture. They're like, look, we have a snake. Like, who thought we had snakes in the Bronx? It's really just having that nature all around you when you're in a dense urban setting it really brings like mental health to everybody.
Now, according to the website, NYRP is the only citywide nature conservancy that focuses on New York's underserved neighborhoods. What are some of the challenges in creating or restoring green spaces in lower income or underserved communities?
So in any crowded environment, in an urban setting, access to open space is at a premium. And really what it is, there's challenges to creating and protecting these spaces. That's kind of what we saw at our founding, was protecting these open spaces. We were founded because the city was going to sell off these community gardens, and so we bought 52 of them. But today, still, access to open space is a challenge, but also you have to fundraise to have the funds necessary to invest in these spaces. You need infrastructure, but also you need that lasting public engagement piece. Community gardens don't run without the community gardeners volunteering their time, but what my department does is we go in and we help create volunteer opportunities, creating community, bringing people together so that we do have people who want to engage in these spaces.
Now, another opportunity you created was the tree giveaway program. Can you tell me a little bit more about that initiative?
Yes, very excited to talk about our tree giveaway program. So every year, New York Restoration Project gives away free trees to New York City residents. So this year we'll be giving out 3,500 free trees. The goal of the program is to increase tree canopy across the city. And so we work with like-minded partner organizations to distribute the free trees in every borough. We'll have several in the Bronx. So starting in April, on the weekends, we'll be giving out these free trees to New York City residents.
And how does that work? Because I know most people maybe don't have a backyard or may live in apartments. How does that work?
So you do have to have access to private land to plant the tree. So if you do have a backyard or you do have a front yard, you can plant there. You can also, if you're part of a garden, you can plant it in your garden. So you do have to have the ability and to plant it somewhere. It can't be on public space, but the trees are free. So if you want a free tree and you do have somewhere that you can plant this, we will launch our registrations as we get closer to April on our website. You can sign up for a location near you to get your free tree.
And that's an amazing, I know New Yorkers love anything that's free. And if it's, benefiting the community, I think it's an amazing program. Now, some of New York City's boroughs have more challenges than others with green space. How do these challenges affect a borough like the Bronx?
Well, the reality is that the Bronx today has so many community gardens because back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there were so many abandoned lots. And the community came together and started transforming these abandoned lots into spaces that they could enjoy. So the state of community gardens today is very different than then. There is more protections, whether you're in a land trust or you are registered with Green Thumb, there is more protections, but community gardens don't thrive without people. So you really need dedicated volunteers who will volunteer their time to also maintain the garden and ensure that the community has access to it.
Now, because I feel like so many of us are used to living in a concrete jungle, we don't even know that people in our neighborhoods are interested in gardening. Did you find, in this work that you had to transform people's thoughts into like being more open to gardening, or was this something that was kind of already in so many of these residents?
Many of the community gardeners are long before my time at NYRP. Actually, some of the community gardeners that we have today are the ones who founded that garden, so before NYRP. And so they are very inspiring, but there are so many ways you can be involved in a community garden outside of gardening. Many of our spaces are also event spaces, so we host programming in there. So if you like to host programming, if you want to go to, say, a music event, you can help volunteer your time to make these things happen. So yes, so there's the twofold where people are in it to garden, but also people are in it to just preserve this open space and have their barbecue in a garden, celebrate a birthday in a garden. So there's really many aspects that people can get involved.
Now, what new initiatives or programs does NYRP have planned for the people in the Bronx this upcoming spring?
This I'm very excited to talk about. So my team, the Engagement and Programming Department, has a lot planned in the Bronx this season. So as part of our NYRP-led programming, we're going to host a fitness series in one of our community gardens this summer. So that's free fitness every week. We also are planning to host a couple cooking demos, so focused on healthy eating. And we're also going to have a couple back-to-school distributions. So we'll give out backpacks and school supplies in some of our community gardens in the Bronx. But in addition to just the programming that we're focused on, many of our community garden groups host their own programming. So we have a program, the community grant application. You can apply for funds from NYRP or equipment loans to host your own programming in our gardens. So what that looked like last year in our Bathgate Community Garden, we had the library hosting weekly story times. In Willis Avenue Community Garden, we had an Easter event and a Halloween event at the end of the season. At our Creston Avenue playground, that was a carnival for the community.
Oh, that sounds fun.
and the exciting thing is that these are all free. No one has to pay to come in and enjoy one of these activities.
Well, I think this is all so amazing, and I think even for me, like, you kind of shown that gardens can just be used so much more than just growing a vegetable, that they are like community spaces, and
Yes.
I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show and kind of share this with our viewers, in our community. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
To learn more about NYRP and their upcoming events, please go to their website at www.nyrp.org or follow them on social media at NYRP. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Open right after this.
Without BronxNet, I don't know how we'd be able to showcase the important and amazing talents that we have here at the Bronx. We've been able to feature lots of great artists, performers, people who deal with coffee and small entrepreneurship businesses, discuss controversial topics, and also be able to share the voice of residents that might not normally have access without a place like BronxNet.
Happy anniversary to BronxNet, 30 years. Wow, brings back so many memories. This exact studio that I'm in right now, I broadcast out of here. This must have been around 2003. I mean, time flies by so quickly. I started out here, it was either Mr. Gary Axelbank and Mr. Batch. With Lady Morsar, we used to do a show here called In the Neighborhood. And I brought so many different guests on this show. To be able to bring your voice to the community is very powerful. To bring hip hop and spirituality, I brought my pastor in this same studio, Pastor Gino Jennings, and I'm sure you guys know who Pastor Gino Jennings is. That's rough. And some disciplined teaching. BronxNet is something that we need to uplift our communities, because this is a platform that we can come, and if you have a vision that's in your mind going into your heart, you can use it to do uplifting things for your community.
Welcome back. With the holiday season behind us, the Better Business Bureau has some tips to help you remain alert, avoiding hidden fees and scams. These can range from holiday return fees to romance scams as we approach Valentine's Day. Brian Rauer, Executive Director for the Better Business Bureau, Metropolitan New York, joined me to discuss what you can do to stay safe. Brian, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, for those who aren't familiar, can you just talk about the Better Business Bureau and what is the overall goal of this organization?
We really have a mission of an ethical marketplace where buyers and sellers actually trust one another. So we do this in a lot of ways. We like to provide impartial and neutral information through things like our business profiles. We maintain tens of thousands of business profiles in just the Metro New York area alone. And we'll give people a lot of information, such as a 3-year complaint history. We'll tell them how businesses have responded to this information. And we're not going to tell consumers shop here or don't shop there, but we try to give them enough information to make much more educated decisions when they're choosing a business, obviously. And we hope that through providing this as a completely free service, we really are enhancing the community for both consumers and businesses.
Now, one of your initiatives is targeting and recognizing scams or places that may have hidden fees, especially those or anything like around or after the holiday season. Can you expand on the challenges consumers face with the rise in these types of scams?
I will tell you, in recent years, we've seen a huge influx in online scams, particularly with COVID. And once we went on lockdown in 2020, people are spending a huge amount of time online. They're banking online, they're paying their credit cards online, they're shopping online constantly. So shopping online has become a huge issue. It's led to a lot more scams. And this is exacerbated in the holiday season. Often you have hard to find products, and you'll see phony websites pop up that suddenly have these products. They have the better prices than anyone else does. In many cases, they're complete scams and you're getting nothing. Or you're getting a cut rate product. And the problem is that you can't get a refund on a product when it's a scam site, obviously. The goal is often to either download malware onto your computer or to steal your identity, because you're giving them your personal and financial information. You gave them your banking information, your credit card information. This leads to many more scams, unfortunately. But even for the legit sites, obviously, or the more legitimate sites, there can still be a lot of problems if you don't understand their policies, if you don't understand how you can get a refund if you have a problem. Even if you've worked with this business before, policies change over time. So make sure that you know their current policy. And by the way, in New York, people seem to believe that you have an inherent right to always exchange an item or get a full refund. This is not true. It'd be nice if it were, but it's not true. The bottom line is that unless it was misrepresented to you or it's a defective product, they have the right to post their own policy. But here's the problem, they don't always post those policies. So understand the policy, particularly if you're online. If you don't see a return policy, if you can't access one, this is a huge red flag to walk away. An ethical business will show you their policy, they'll tell you the hoops you have to go through, whether or not you can get a full refund, is it only store credit, and whether or not you can exchange the item and how long you have to do that. The problem is if you don't know the rules and you don't understand what's involved in doing that. And I'll give you an example. There could be a restocking fee. It could be as much as, say, 25% of the cost of an item. Pretty substantial. What about shipping and handling? Suddenly you're paying for restocking and the cost to ship it back. You may not be very happy with what you get in response once you try to return a product. So if you're online, find out, can you return it to a brick and mortar? And therefore save the shipping and handling on that. Who pays for that anyway? Find out exactly what's required and exactly what the rules and regulations are so you can follow those. By the way, do you need to hold on to your packaging? In many cases, they won't accept a return without packaging. If you do have packaging, obviously, are they still charging you again to ship it and handle it back to them? So make sure you understand the rules and regulations before you pay that price.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, I think, because this is something that pretty much everybody has probably ran into at some point, expecting that they can get a return or exchange, and they say, no, only store credit. And I know so many people have been upset with that. And this is just something that happens often, especially, I'm assuming, after the holiday season. Can you talk about maybe gift exchanges? I know that, like, sometimes if somebody gives you a gift, there's like a receipt and you can return it. Does this apply to that as well?
I mean, hold on to your gift receipt and ask your friends and family if they're giving you that, can I please have a copy of that gift receipt? In many cases, store policies require you to have a receipt, proof of purchase. And if you don't have that, you're out of luck. In many cases, they want to, if you go into the brick and mortar store, they want to see ID. So if you're not the purchaser, you may have to ask your friend or family member who gave you the gift if they wouldn't mind accompanying you or doing the return on their own. I know that's awkward. I understand that, but the fact is, if you want to return, in some cases, that's required. So again, before anyone makes that purchase, understand the store's rules and regulations, and they're supposed to tell you beforehand. And I will tell you this, if the only time you find out that there are no refunds is after you've made the purchase, that's a hugely unethical business practice. You're not permitted to do that. You have to know you can't return a product before you make the purchase, not after the fact. So make sure you understand before you make the purchase or before your friends and family make the purchase. Encourage them to find out the rules.
Now, as the new year begins, I want to say that many people actually feel inspired to start their health and weight loss journey. We know that this is like a really big thing for so many people. What are the scams or maybe some gray areas that are associated as we kind of head into that new year, like where people are kind of wanting to change their health and eating habits?
I will tell you, we have seen a huge influx in reported scams in this area just over the past year with BBB. And I will tell you, one of the biggest issues we see are something I will call subscription traps. You are signing up for a free in quotes, trial period, and in many cases, free is absolutely not free. You think you're making a one-time purchase or it's just a trial period and then it ends. But in many cases, it converts to a subscription, a monthly subscription. And how do you find out? Well, you check your credit card, and months later, you see you've been charged each month for something else. So you thought you were spending $50 on a product or service or nothing, and it turns out you've just spent hundreds of dollars over the course of several months until you unwittingly discover it. The problem is that often this is buried in the fine print, or mice type as I call it, where you don't really see it, or if it's online, it could be 2 or 3 screens away and you never click through to find out this information. So before you accept the free subscription, make sure you understand all the rules and all the regulations involved in that. Is it an opt-out? Do I have to cancel it myself? Is it going to continue, or does it just stop after, say, 2 weeks when they said it would? And if you're making a one-time purchase, make sure that it is truly a one-time purchase. Read the fine print. What exactly are you agreeing to do? That's a big problem.
Now, during this time, I want to mention that we see many independent businesses or entrepreneurs offer classes, regimens. What are some red flags that people should overall pretty much look for when they are going to maybe go into some of these classes or, buy, someone's cookbook online? What are some red flags they should look for?
And by the way, there are some true scams where they're completely phony sites, whether it's not a real product or service. They're out to get your information, your banking information, your credit card information, your personally identifiable information, and they're using that for the purposes of identity theft. So right off the bat, there are some that are complete scams, so you're not getting anything. And then good luck ever getting a refund. You can't find them at that point. But for the ones that are just sketchier and it's an actual existing site, some of the big problems you have are tremendously overpromising and under-delivering. You're basically seeing them guarantee your permanent weight loss. By definition, that's misleading. There's no such thing as guaranteeing permanent weight loss. Or they'll promise you a miracle product, pure a protein powder, whatever it is, some kind of powder that is going to, you take it once a day and you don't have to exercise and you don't have to diet, you don't have to do anything basically, and you automatically lose weight. Again, that's by definition misleading. If you don't have to do anything and you automatically lose weight, this is a problem. So they overpromise, and after several months, you find out that not much is actually happening. And they'll couple this with wonderful before and after pictures of people who probably never actually used the product, and this is how they trap you. So whenever you see overly glowing testimonials and products that make these wild claims and guarantees and promises to do something without any effort, any time, and any diet and any exercise, those are huge red flags that these are not legitimate products. And by the way, the other concern you should have is if there is a product that is not listed, which may actually interact with prescription medication you're on, or may actually have dangerous side effects. You don't actually know what you're dealing with in some cases. And in some cases, you have products where the FDA has actually recalled them, and they found out that they're actually dangerous to your health. So be very wary about a product that's really untested and unproven. It may actually be deleterious to your health.
Now, I want to talk about another holiday that is coming up, which is Valentine's Day. We see a lot of romance scams happen during this time, but they can actually happen all year round. Can you tell me a little bit more about romance scams?
Yeah, those are particularly problematic. And I will tell you this, in recent years, we've also seen an influx of romance scams. Those have actually increased. And they're one of the highest ticket items in terms of dollar loss for consumers, for scam victims, unfortunately. And they tend to come out of the woodwork, around Valentine's Day, but they happen all year round. And I think over the last several years, that's become a main way that people are meeting one another. They'll often post something on one of the dating sites or one of the social apps, and it will be a too good to be true profile. They'll pick an incredibly attractive picture, and they will be very successful financially, all the things to get you to become interested in that case. And then they're kind of grooming their victims. They'll get to know them very quickly. They'll try to build trust very quickly. They'll perhaps buy them little gifts, flowers, or things that are fairly nominal, but to show them that they care. They'll build up a trusting relationship unusually quickly, to the point where they're telling them they love them in a very short period of time to gain their trust. One of the things they also do is try to separate you out from friends and family, tell you if they're criticizing them, then they're simply trying to break us up. Anything they can do to keep you from checking them out. What I would say is that anytime they try and immediately get you off the app quickly, the dating app quickly, whether it's through texting you or phone calls, they don't want to be discovered on the app and have them be kind of outed on the app, so they'll try and take you offline. And at that point, when they build up that trust, they'll kind of test you out. They'll try and find out whether or not you will pay for something small to see if you'll actually support them. And then they go in for the big hit. And that's where they claim that they're having a huge family problem. They can't meet you in person, by the way. They can claim they're in the military, they're stationed overseas. There's always an excuse not to meet you in person. And at that point, there'll be a problem. They need surgery. They had a car accident. They can't pay their bills. Or they really want to meet you in person. Can you go ahead and wire me the money so we'll buy a ticket and I can come see you? Right. And again, this is all a scam. They're just trying to get you to trust them and to pay this over. And I will tell you, if anyone ever tells you they want you to wire money or use a prepaid debit card, you've never met them before, do not do this. It is a huge red flag. Run away as fast as you can. This is a complete scam. As a general rule, whatever they do that is their preferred method of payment, by the way, because you'll basically never get your money back at that point. Right. They don't want a credit card because you can challenge a credit card.
Right.
They want to make sure that they're in a situation where once they get you once, they can go back and get you again. And what's really insidious is that there have been times once they've been discovered, they will then come back to you and pose as law enforcement and claim they've actually caught the person who's done this to you, and for several $1,000s, they can help you get your money back. So the scam continues and the circle continues on and on. It's very insidious. And many people don't report this because they are so humiliated, and they shouldn't be, but so humiliated that they don't want anyone else to know about this. So it goes unreported.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and kind of, educating and, letting people know to be alert about the scams and, fees that are happening right during these times. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
We've come to the end of our show today. I'd like to thank all of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recable cast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67 and Verizon Files Channel 33, or watch anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You can catch a brand new episode of Open with Darren Jaime on Wednesday and with Rena Valentine on Friday. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.